Before you scroll away, imagine this: a crowded diner, a tired little girl asleep on a man's shoulder, and one quiet question that would change two lives forever. Stay with this story until the end, because the final moment brings everything full circle. And if stories about kindness, second chances, and unseen strength move you even a little, tap like, subscribe, and stay here with us. It truly helps this channel grow, and it means you won't miss stories like this one. The night was heavy with rain, the kind that soaks your shoes and your thoughts at the same time. The diner sat on the corner like it had always been there and always would be, its flickering neon sign buzzing softly as if tired too. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and fried onions, comfort mixed with exhaustion. At a small table near the window sat a man in a worn jacket, his shoulders slightly hunched, his arm wrapped protectively around a little girl no older than 6. Her head rested against his chest, her breathing slow and even, her small fingers still clutching the strap of a faded pink backpack. Across the room, at a table usually reserved for people who never noticed anyone else, sat a woman in an elegant coat, her posture straight, her eyes sharp despite the late hour. She was the CEO of one of the fastest-growing companies in the city, a name that appeared in magazines and interviews, a woman people described as intimidating, brilliant, and unreachable. That night, though, her phone lay face down. Her coffee had gone cold, and her attention was fixed on the man and his daughter. The waitress approached the man's table, her voice gentle but firm, explaining that the diner would close soon. The man nodded quickly, apologizing, fumbling in his pocket for crumpled bills. That was when the little girl stirred, blinking sleep from her eyes, confusion flickering across her face. The man whispered something to her, brushing hair from her forehead, and she smiled faintly before closing her eyes again. The woman across the room felt something tighten in her chest, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself in years. The man stood, hesitating, clearly unsure how to balance a sleeping child and a tray of untouched food. He glanced around, embarrassed, and then his eyes met hers. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Then, almost without thinking, he walked toward her table. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said quietly, his voice tired but polite. "But would you mind if we shared the table for a minute? She fell asleep, and I don't want to rush her." It was such a small question. Want to share the table. Not money, not favors, not pity. Just space. Just a little understanding. The CEO blinked, surprised. People usually wanted something from her, and they were never this honest, never this simple. She nodded, pulling out a chair. "Of course," she said. "Please." He thanked her more times than necessary, settling carefully into the seat. Up close, she noticed the dark circles under his eyes, the calluses on his hands, the way his arm never loosened around his daughter. They sat in silence at first, the rain tapping against the window like a quiet rhythm. After a while, the man spoke again, almost to himself. He told her he was a single dad. His wife had passed 2 years earlier, suddenly, leaving him with a toddler and a mountain of grief. He worked 2 jobs now, construction during the day, deliveries at night. This diner was a halfway point between shifts, a place to rest for a moment before the next long stretch of responsibility. The woman listened, really listened. She didn't interrupt or check her phone. She felt something crack open inside her, memories she usually kept buried. She remembered her own childhood, the nights her father worked late, the empty kitchen table, the silence that followed success built on sacrifice. When the waitress returned, the CEO quietly paid for the man's meal and ordered dessert for the little girl to take home. When he realized what she'd done, his eyes filled with tears he tried desperately to hide. He didn't want charity, but gratitude spilled out of him anyway. She waved it off, embarrassed by the attention, insisting it was nothing. Before they parted, the little girl woke up again, yawning, her eyes landing on the woman with curiosity. "Thank you for sharing your table," she said softly, her voice barely louder than the rain outside. The CEO smiled, a real smile, the kind that reaches the eyes. "Thank you for sharing your dad," she replied. They left the diner separately, the moment fading into the night. The woman assumed she would forget it. She didn't. Years passed. The company grew. Awards piled up. Yet that night returned to her often, especially when decisions felt heavy or people became numbers on a spreadsheet. She began funding quiet programs, childcare for night workers, scholarships for kids with single parents, flexible hours for employees who needed them. She never talked about why. One afternoon, During a visit to a new community center her company had helped build, she noticed a familiar face. Older, stronger, but unmistakable. The man stood near the entrance, wearing a uniform with her company's logo. Beside him stood a girl with the same bright eyes, now taller, confident, smiling. He recognized her instantly. "You shared your table with us," he said, emotion thick in his voice. He told her that night had changed more than she knew. It reminded him that kindness still existed when he was close to giving up. He'd applied for a job at her company months later, encouraged by a flyer about family-friendly hours. He'd built a career there, slowly, proudly. His daughter dreamed of becoming a designer, inspired by the buildings and spaces she'd grown up around. The CEO felt tears sting her eyes. In that moment, she understood something simple and powerful: success wasn't about distance or power. It was about presence, about sharing the table when you didn't have to. As they parted again, this time with laughter and promises to stay in touch, the rain began to fall softly, just like that night long ago. And the woman knew she would never forget that question, that small, brave request that reminded her who she wanted to be. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that kindness can ripple farther than we ever imagine, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Stay at the table with us. There are so many more stories waiting to be shared.